Hello, my name is Chet'la Sebree, and I will be reading A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde. This is a poem I wish I'd read in high school, primarily because I think the poem encourages us to speak up, encourages us to try and not be fearful even in the midst of fear. When I was in high school, I went to a large public school where I was one of 600 people in my grade at some point, and I'd come to this large public school from a small private school. And so was excited by the fact that there was a level of invisibility in that high school. But I also think because there were so many people, it was really hard for me to figure out who I was. Like I'd been in this small private school for many years with only 60 other kids in my grade, and they had all known me their whole, most of their lives. And we were all kind of set up to be one particular way. And um, the anonymity of a bigger high school was exciting, but it also meant that I had a hard time sort of figuring out who I was and was really fearful and anxious a lot of the time, and went to fantasy novels and other novels in general just to kind of go off into these foreign worlds and really, get to run away essentially. It was like escapism. And it took me a while to sort of find my own voice and find out the way that I wanted to be in the world. And I think if I'd read this poem by Audre Lorde earlier, I think I would have known better it was okay to be fearful, and that it was okay to be afraid, and that that's part of being human, which I thought being an adult and being a teenager meant like I had to have it all figured out, and that adults were never afraid. And I think this poem shows me that we're always fearful, but that doesn't mean that, and there might be reasons for anxiety, but that doesn't mean that there's no space for us to also move forward and say the things that we need to say and tell the people we love that we love them, and speak up in times of chaos. And I think right now we live a little bit in a time of chaos. I think that there's a lot of political and social unrest. There's lots happening this year in 2020 with the pandemic. And so for me, A Litany for Survival was a poem I wish I'd read in high school, but is a poem that still, for me, is very much so a balm. And I hope that it encourages you all to speak up despite your fears and to be present in all of your sort of feelings and understandings of the world. And I think for me, the refrain or the repeated portion of the poem that is, "We were never meant to survive," um, really strikes me every single time. So I hope that this poem gives you all a little something that you might need today. So again, I'm reading A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going, in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once, before and after, seeking now, seeking a now that can breed futures, like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.